Our guest today is the President of the Illinois Senate. He earned his bachelor's degree in political science at Loyola University and graduated from Loyola's Law School in 1974. Our guest today was elected to the Illinois General Assembly in 1979 and served in the House for 12 years. In 1992, he was elected to the Illinois Senate. Our guest today and his wife Pam are the proud parents of 5 children. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the City Club of Chicago the President of the Illinois Senate, John Cullerton. Mr. President. Hi, John. Have some fun up here.
Thank you very much. We scheduled this so that we could have this opportunity for me to talk to you before, the regular session of the legislature started, when it's a slow time in Springfield. But then the House of Representatives impeached our governor. And so we adopted some rules to deal with that impeachment, which starts today at noon. And part of those rules involve the senators taking an oath to make sure that we not speculate on the outcome or about evidence that might be presented. And that was certainly something which we took very seriously, which I will adhere to, of course. However, the governor has gone public and has criticized the rules that we adopted. So I thought it would be appropriate just to explain to you how we went about that process. We formed a committee in the Senate, and we had public hearings, 3 public hearings, 2 of which were held on the 16th floor of the James R. Thompson Center, about 150 feet from the governor's office. No one from the governor's office came to weigh in as to how these rules should be drafted. Since we've never had an impeachment of the governor before, we looked to the last impeachment that the public is aware of, that being of President Clinton. And we looked at those rules. I was actually surprised a little bit myself when I saw them. I had been a public defender earlier when I first became a lawyer, and I obviously noted the difference between a criminal trial and an impeachment trial. But we assumed that by using these rules, people would consider them to be fair. After all, it did result in the acquittal of President Clinton. So that's what we did. We adopted the rules. They passed unanimously, and they specifically dealt with the Constitution requiring that we do justice. Now, the governor has specifically objected to one of the rules, I guess, by claiming that he can't call any witnesses in his own defense. Now, this is absolutely not accurate, would be the polite way of putting it. Okay? The governor can call any witness that he wishes to call. And specifically, he could call himself as a witness. Now, I understand that when you have a criminal charge pending, you'd want to be very reluctant to come to an impeachment trial and talk about the matters dealing with the criminal trial prior to that trial. There's 13 allegations in the House impeachment, 8 of which deal with a criminal investigation. So those other 5 are out there. The governor could certainly come to Springfield and talk about those himself and explain his actions and why they're not an impeachable offense. But he has chosen to not even file an appearance. He has chosen not to submit any list of witnesses and to literally go to New York instead of Springfield for the first day of his trial. And it's disappointing, because you'd think that you'd want to come to defend yourself where you can. Now, he has talked about the fact that he can't bring these witnesses in. What he's referring to is the U.S. Attorney, Patrick Fitzgerald, had, when the House was doing its investigation, the House had asked for certain people to be subpoenaed. The U.S. Attorney wrote a letter saying, please do not subpoena the certain number of witnesses. And they included witnesses that I'm sure the House prosecutor would like to call to use against the governor. So the prosecution, the House prosecutor is limited in bringing those witnesses. And, of course, there's other witnesses that the governor now claims he would like to call. He specifically referenced Rahm Emanuel, and he said that Rahm Emanuel went on Face the Nation and said things which the governor felt would be helpful to his defense. Well, the fact of the matter is that he doesn't need to have Rahm Emanuel in Springfield. He can show the tape of Face the Nation in the trial. And in fact, if he doesn't show up and defend himself, I would suspect that maybe some senator would subpoena the tape of Face the Nation and present it in his defense, even in his absence. So this is a misrepresentation, as I said, of what the rules are about. Now, he's claimed that he's not going to get a fair trial, and it's rigged. Here's why, in my opinion, there's only been one impeachment of a governor in the last 70 years in the United States. And it's kind of a built-in protection against people being railroaded into being impeached. And think about it, it might be, you might view it a little selfishly, but we are all elected officials, the senators and the state representatives. We are all subject to an impeachment, potentially. Any rules that we adopt now, any precedents that we set, they could be applied to us. And so I can assure you that the senators that I've talked to, all of my colleagues on the Democratic side, and many of the Republicans who served on that committee that drafted the rules, we take this very, very seriously. We spent 6 hours going over these rules to see and to make sure that we're doing something that would be fair, even if you don't think about the governor and you think about yourself. How would you like to be treated if you were the subject of an impeachment? So if there was some politically unpopular thing that we did and you were in the minority party and the other party decided that they wanted to try to remove you, what kind of rules would apply to us? That's how seriously we are taking this. And as a former defense lawyer, I know how I would represent the governor. I know what I would do. I would come down and I would go through each one of these allegations and give the governor's explanation and do the best I could, even on the criminal cases. I would probably ask the legislature if they would not take up the criminal cases, maybe defer it. But we have no choice. The fact is that we are not rushing to judgment. We scheduled this trial because the regular legislative session was scheduled to begin February 5th. You can imagine that we'd want to finish the impeachment trial before we do our regular session. Can you imagine how difficult it would be to have an impeachment trial while you're doing the regular session? You're trying to find out whether or not a bill will be signed by the governor, and the governor's wondering how you're going to vote on his impeachment removal issue. So, I mean, you can't have both go at the same time. We did not, as the governor said, schedule the end of his trial. We didn't do that. We would take as much time as is necessary. We would take, I think we added an extra 9 days. Now, of course, with his not being there, it would probably not take as long. The senators can submit written questions to the chief judge who would preside. I'm sure that we will be doing that in the absence of anybody there to cross-examine him. So I take issue with his representation that we're railroading him, that it's rigged. It's not. The rules do allow him to testify himself. They allow him to call any witnesses that he wants. And the reason, it's obviously of great interest to people about this fact that we've had our first impeachment of a governor, but it comes at a time when there is a true financial crisis in the state. And this is the urgency that we have to address. We, maybe for the third time in the history of the state, have taken in less money into the state than we did the year before. It's probably $2.5 billion that we're bringing in less than the previous year. And a lot of people in Chicago, especially the Chicago media market, don't really follow state government. So they're kind of surprised when you tell them, you know, where we spend our money. In general terms, if you just said we have a $28 billion budget, half of that goes to health care, $14 billion, $11 billion goes to education, and only about $3 billion goes to the operation of state government. And so when you bring in $2.5 billion less than you had the year before, what are you going to shortchange? Education funding? Healthcare funding? In fact, the healthcare funding costs have gone up because during a recession, there's more people eligible. And the operation of state government, you know, people say, why don't you cut out the waste in state government? We have the same number of employees we had in 1972. We have the lowest ratio of state employees to population in the nation by far. We have state parks that are closed. Historical sites are closed. We have, in addition to having so few state employees to provide basic services, we have bills that we have not paid. Probably about $4 to $5 billion in bills we have not paid. I talked to a physician in Elgin a couple weeks ago who told me that she had about 30% of her patients were Medicaid. She hasn't been paid since August, and she's not going to take them anymore. We do not pay our bills. And so what we're trying to do in this legislative session is try something a little bit different. We have a bicameral legislature. We've gotten away from that recently. I thought I'd try something a little different. I thought I'd try talking to the Speaker of the House, who happens to be a Democrat. I served in the House for 12 years. I've been in the Senate longer than any other Democrat, 18 years. But I thought it'd be good to talk to the Speaker, because you can't pass a law unless you pass the identical language out of both chambers. And then, of course, to engage with the executive branch. Now, that's why the outcome of the impeachment trial is so critical, because if the governor is removed, Pat Quinn would be the governor. He'd be a different person to deal with and to engage in. If the governor is not removed, then we have Governor Blagojevich, and we will then talk to him about how to solve these problems. He has adamantly said he's against any tax increase, and if that's the case, then the legislature can decide whether or not, if it's necessary to have a tax increase, and that is anything, in my opinion, should be on the table to deal with these crises, then we would have to decide whether or not we could try to overrule the governor or not. Now, one of the things that we have also not done in the last 6 years is pass a capital bill. The capital bill is critical for a couple reasons. The roads and the bridges are crumbling. The CTA, the RTA, PACE, Metra, I mean, we're taking seats out of the CTA cars because there's not enough room for people who want to get on. We need a capital bill for mass transit. We need a capital bill for roads and bridges and educational facilities. Everybody knows, and there's federal dollars that are at risk if we don't do this capital bill. But you need a revenue stream, approximately $1 billion a year, to pay off the bonds for this capital bill. Now, in the past, the governor has tried things that, in my opinion, won't work. Selling the lottery, trying to get all of the different interests together to try to do a gambling bill, which is very difficult to do because it's so complicated. And it's just something which hasn't worked. And we need to do this. We need to do it, again, because the roads and bridges are crumbling, but also we need to do it because we have to put people back to work. And this is the good news is that the federal government and our former colleague, who only 4 years ago was sitting with me in the General Assembly, is now the president. We have met with federal officials. The stimulus package is working its way through Congress. I should point out as an aside, I don't know if it's constitutional, but the federal government has passed a amendment in the House that says that we don't get any federal dollars as long as Rod Blagojevich is the governor of the state of Illinois. I don't know that it's constitutional, but it's probably going to be admitted into evidence during the trial. So the problem then is how do we get this this capital bill passed, and it's something which clearly is critical for the reasons that I stated. So my plan is to work with the House. The other idea that I had would be to try to talk to the Republicans. We have 22 Republicans, 37 Democrats, and I've had a good relationship with working with them. And I'll tell you quite frankly, Senator Obama, when he first got elected, for 6 years, we were in the minority. You can't pass a bill with just your own members. When you stand up on the Senate floor, you have to get votes from the other side. And so institutionally, you have to go work with the other side. And that's what he did. And then when we took control again, instead of being vindictive, we continued to work with the Republicans. And that's what my plan is. And Senator Rodonio is the new leader for the Republicans in the Senate. And we've already established a very good relationship. We're just trying to change even the tone in Springfield by having joint dinners and bringing them into the process. I don't feel threatened by the fact that the Republicans will be at the table. We'll get a better work product by getting their input. If they can provide us with some votes for some of these tough things, that would even be better. But the main thing is we want to try to work together. So that's the task at hand. We are obviously distracted by the fact that we have this impeachment trial. That's where people have, throughout the nation, have directed their attention. It's too bad in a way that we've been kind of viewed as the laughingstock when we should be celebrating the fact that one of our former colleagues became the president. But that's what it is. So we're going to do the best we can to solve the problems of the state. We're going to work hard. We're going to be fair to the governor in this trial, even in his absence, and hopefully we can get past it and get on with solving the problems of the state. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Senator Cullerton. Once again, if anyone has some questions, just hold up your card. There's a couple in the back of the room. Teresa, way back, a tweet's getting him. And we'll proceed, and we'll handle as many of these questions as we can. This is from a former colleague of yours, Senator Art Berman. What are the chances of passing school funding reform, and when? Illinois is 49th in education funding.
Hello, Senator Berman, the leading expert in Illinois when he served in the Illinois Senate on education. We have had a very good working relationship between the business community and the unions in Illinois, the education unions, in working on reforms and potentially more money for education. Last year, Senator Meeks introduced legislation which would have increased the income tax. By the way, our income tax rate in Illinois is, for individuals, is the lowest of any state in the nation that has an income tax. And that proposal would have raised income taxes, and primarily most of the money would have gone to education. If we were to have more money for education, it probably would involve an income tax increase, and it's certainly, in my opinion, as I said, on the table. But obviously we need to have enough votes for it, and we need to have it signed by a governor. The reforms, though, would be fiscal accountability, teacher accountability. We have made great progress in getting the unions to support that, and the business community has done a great job in supporting that. People view education funding as an investment as long as it's not being wasted, and so that's going to be a top priority. However, as I said, we don't have the money to pay what we appropriated for this year. We don't have the money to pay what we appropriated this year. So before we talk about expanding money for education, we have to figure out some way to just come up with the money just to pay our bills right now.
Thank you, Senator. This is from City Club member and former State Treasurer, Judy Bar-Topinka. Thank you, Tweed. If impeached, does the governor's pension benefits continue, and can he use state plane for his press public relations campaign?
Well, to be technical, he already has been impeached, and the issue is whether or not he should be removed. I seem to recall that with regard to former Governor Ryan, the issue of his pension is a separate matter, not determined by the legislature. What the legislature votes on is whether or not, two things, whether or not to remove the governor from office and whether or not to bar him from the ability to run for any office in the future. One of the things that the governor could have availed himself of was to have stepped aside as the governor. Our Constitution would allow that, to retain the name of governor. The lieutenant governor would be the acting governor, and he would still be paid. But he didn't avail himself of that opportunity. Instead, he has remained as governor and indicated he doesn't wish to attend his impeachment trial.
Okay, now that you've had two fastballs, we'll give you a curveball to hit. This is from Mike Gonzalez, City Club member from way back. Who in your family is the street, quote-unquote, Cullerton named after? And what does he have in common with Finance Chairman Ed Burke? This is like 20 questions.
I'm very proud of my family. We are one of the original settlers of Chicago. My great-great-grandfather came from Ireland in 1835 when the population of the city was 4,000 people. His son was a state representative in 1872, and then he became an alderman. And he holds the record, Alderman Burke, for being the alderman the longest of any alderman in the city of Chicago. Alderman Burke has the record for being the longest continuously serving alderman in the city of Chicago. When the guy died in 1920, they named the street after him. And I am constantly, and the house that he built is still over at 1634 West Cullerton. So I'm real proud of my family, and I hope that the city never plans to change the name.
Obviously, Senator Cullerton must have earned an A in history. This is from Sharon Alter, who's at UIC and William Rainey Harper College. What are your top three priorities in how you plan to cope with the dire financial condition of the state of Illinois? And she's retired, so this question says, how do you plan to cope with public pension funding problems?
Probably should have mentioned the pensions. In that $28 billion that we spend from general revenue, about $3.5 billion goes to the pension fund. Our pension fund has been described as the worst funded pension funds in the United States. The unfunded liability is the highest. The reason for that, there's obviously argument about this, but I think most people would agree that there were many years where, over the last 25 years or so, we did not pay into the pension fund the amount that we should have as an employer. There's a debate as to whether or not the benefits are extremely generous or not. There's a definite debate about that. But I think one of the things we have to admit is that we did not pay in. About 10 years ago, we passed a bill that said we have to catch up, and so that over a 50-year period, we have to pay an extra amount in to make up for the past years, in addition to the amount that you actuarially would pay in every year. And so we've been doing that, and it's a big drain on our state finances. There's a possibility that we could look at limiting some future benefits. and this has received great opposition from the unions. But what we're talking about, they object to a two-tiered system. But I should point out that we in the General Assembly have a two-tiered system. We have lowered our benefits so that some senators have a constitutional right to benefits which are greater than others. And we will probably look at that this year, whether or not people who haven't yet been hired, much less retired, whether or not their benefits could be reduced. Because if we were to do that, then over that remaining 40-year period, we would save billions of dollars, and then we could, in effect, refinance that payment that we make to the pension fund, thus saving money today. So that's one of the things that we have to look at. But people should know that there's a constitutional right to your pension benefits. They cannot be reduced once they've been earned, and they will not be reduced, and we will responsibly fund those pension funds, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you very much, Senator. This is from Keith Kalinowski, City Club member. Could you explain your vote against the recall of office holders?
Yes. There was a bill that passed the House allowing for a recall. There was a provision added over my objection in the Senate that added judges to the recall proposition. And I felt that it was an attack on the independence of the judiciary. And so I stood up on the Senate floor and said, I'm voting against this bill specifically because it would allow for the recall of a judge. It's important to me to have an independent judiciary. If a judge makes a tough, unpopular decision, I don't think it should be proper for somebody to just go in and to spend a lot of money, if they had it, to try to get rid of a judge because of an unpopular decision. That would have a chilling effect on the judiciary. And obviously, when people voted on the recall, they were thinking about Governor Blagojevich. And it was pointed out during the debate that, there's other ways to remove governors. And, for example, the impeachment process, which is what we're going through. So I think, when you pass a bill, when you have one person in mind, you got to be careful because it might have ramifications for everybody, and it might not be a good public policy. In that specific case, it was not good public policy because of the way it affected the judiciary.
Thank you. This is from Carol Brown from the CTA. Under the Illinois First Roads to Transit funding was 4-1. Please comment on expected funding for transit under any new capital bill.
Yes. Carol, thank you for your help, by the way, in last year's bill to provide money for the operations of the RTA and the CTA. The federal stimulus package appears to be on track to pass very quickly, and it will give the state about $1 billion for road funds and about $500 million for mass transit. That ratio of 2-to-1 is traditionally what we have had in our capital bill. For some reason, last year when we did our capital bill that didn't pass, it was skewed so that the ratio was, I think, 10-to-1 for roads in an effort to try to get some votes from downstate or whatever. I wasn't in charge. I don't know why it was that ratio. But I can tell you that our plan in our bill would be to have that ratio of 2-to-1 because mass transit is just as important, obviously, as the roads and bridges. When you drive down the Kennedy, you look over at one of those L cars going downtown. There's 100 potential cars that are off the road because people are on that L. So we understand the importance, certainly for my district especially, which is the north side of Chicago, where most people take the buses or the Ls. It's even more important. But that ratio of 2-to-1 will be there in our state capital bill, and it looks like that's the same ratio that we have coming from the feds.
Thank you. And I have a question here, actually two members, Joyce Saxon of our Board of Governors and Bob Manowith, sort of the same question. What do you see as the budget process this year, and would a tax increase cover the deficit, and how much of it?
Well, I think that given the state of the state, as I've described it, you have to say that a tax increase has to be on the table. But I think before we would indicate that we're for a tax increase, we should wait and see what happens with the federal government. Because in addition to this stimulus package dealing with roads and bridges, there's also a lot of money on the table dealing with Medicaid. And I described to you the fact that half of our budget goes to this health care. The federal government could be providing billions of dollars for us to help pay for our Medicaid cost. So we really can't answer that question as to whether or not we would need a tax increase to balance our budget until we see what they provide. This, of course, is separate and apart from the capital bill. The capital bill we need to pass. Their $1 billion and their $500 million for mass transit is not enough. We need to pass a capital bill. That will require some type of a tax increase. It'll have to bring in about $1 billion a year. We are considering the income tax. We are considering the motor fuel tax. By the way, I should point out we have a motor fuel tax in Illinois. It's 19 cents per gallon. We also have a sales tax on gasoline, which goes into a different fund. That goes into the General Revenue Fund. The gallonage motor fuel tax goes into the road fund. The reason why I mention that is because recently, as late as Friday, the governor was talking about us increasing the sales tax on gasoline. That's a misstatement. No one's talking about increasing the sales tax on gasoline. We already have a sales tax on gasoline. What we're considering is whether or not to raise the 19 cent per gallon gallonage tax. Obviously, it's on the table. People are aware of the fact that the price of gas has come down dramatically. That money that goes into the road from that 19 cents has been declining over the years because as people get better gas mileage, there's more cars and there's less money to pay for the roads, and that's one of the problems we've had. So coming back to the original question, we can't talk about whether or not we need a tax increase until we see how much money we get from the federal government, of course, with the exception of the capital bill.
Thank you. We have several questions left. This is from Kevin Black, City Club member. When will we see changes to the Illinois condominium code to protect owners from disreputable developers hiding behind LLCs to set around requirements?
When I first got to the legislature, there were many people, especially downstate, that didn't know what a condominium was. Thought it was some kind of a birth control device or something. So they all started in my district. So we have quite frankly what we do with condominiums is we really have input from the bar associations. The bar associations have their own committees made up of attorneys that represent both developers and residents, and we really look to them to get their input. And there's been a lot of legislation dealing with this, but we try to bring consensus on all of these things. So there's been a number of issues raised about the reserves that condominium developers have had, whether or not they're sufficient. There's been arguments about whether or not people can even condominiums can ban smoking in certain units. There's all these issues that come before the legislature. We try to get a consensus and we try to work through the bar association. So anybody's interested in legislation in Springfield on condominiums, it's one area where I really would recommend we see if we can work it through the bar association first and then bring that issue to the legislature after they do that.
Thank you, Senator. Our final question is from our friend Paul Green, who's in Florida visiting his ailing father today, and sorry he can't be here, but it deals with if the Senate convicts Governor Blagojevich, when does the lieutenant governor become the governor? Does the outgoing governor who's convicted have a right to appeal his conviction to any body? Could you sort of explain that process?
Yes. The last impeachment that we had in the United States of a governor was Governor Meacham in Arizona, and he was removed from office. His later criminal case resulted in a not guilty, and he appealed the impeachment. the Arizona Supreme Court struck that down. In fact, there's never been a successful appeal of any impeachment that's in the history of the United States, to my knowledge. And that's because the only issue would be whether or not you violated the Constitution. The Constitution is very simple in this regard. It just says you have a trial, you should do justice, the chief judge presides, and you can impeach for cause. So we are following the Constitution. So if the Senate voted to remove the governor, I believe, by operation of law, the lieutenant governor would be become the governor, would be sworn in immediately, and would be the governor. Now, the former governor, in this case, had he been removed, can always file an appeal, but I believe that it would not prevail. Okay.
Thank you very much, Senator Cullerton. Senator, before you leave, we have a little token of our appreciation for your taking time from your busy schedule and having the plane wait. The Centennial History, City Club of Chicago, and the mug, and these will pass any ethics tests that we know of. So, John, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.